My name is Shabarekh. I'm the Director of Advanced Analytics at Aptima, and I'm also the Principal Investigator on this research effort I'm talking about today. The motivation for our work today is that space is getting increasingly crowded. You can see from this graph the upward trend of the number of objects in space, starting back in 1957 with the launch of Sputnik to today, in which we have a whole lot more objects up in space. This growth was accelerated by a number of high-profile collisions that you can see, and so we are now in a congested environment. The need exists to scale the SSA tradecraft in order to account for this number of objects in space. Currently, we're doing detect, track, characterize, catalog tradecraft, which is basically accounting for the location for all objects in space, including satellites and debris, at any given point in time. You can imagine how that might not scale up so particularly well. But from an intelligence perspective, it's also somewhat insufficient, because it's not enough to know where an object is now. We need to think about where an object will be in the future. This is particularly focused on maneuverable objects, so satellites. Once you introduce the notion of maneuverability, you introduce the notion of intent. And therefore, we really need to understand what activities satellites are capable of, what its relationship is to the environment, as well as other objects. And to this audience today, this should sound pretty familiar to a lot of challenges that we are dealing with in this community as well. So it made sense to take applications and methodology from ABI, from the GEOINT community, and apply it to SSA. So move away from counts in the number of satellites and objects in space, and start thinking about what activities they're capable of performing. That is a very ambitious task, as you can imagine. So for the purposes of this research, we scoped it a little bit in order to learn patterns of life for satellites in geostationary orbit. Satellites in the GeoBelt are constrained by physics, and therefore they have these really highly regularized patterns of life. And in order to maintain a fixed position over Earth, they need to perform station-keeping maneuvers. And these station-keeping maneuvers are very regular. They're repeatable for any given satellite, time of year, as well as location in the GeoBelt. So the goal was to automatically learn these patterns of life and then use them to predict future maneuvers. Our sponsors at the Air Force Research Labs gave us astrometric data, which is basically positional information, and told us to learn the patterns of life for these set of satellites in the GeoBelt for a multi-year period. The goal was to take these to predict future maneuvers, and more critically is to rapidly detect when there is a deviation from expected patterns of life. Emphasis on the rapid. So when we're in space, when we talk about patterns of life, what we're looking at here are these inclination histories. So what we're looking at in the lower right-hand side is your normal patterns of life for the Galaxy 15 satellite. And what you see are these nice trends of maneuvers that are happening in order to maintain that fixed position over Earth. If you look at it over multi-years, you'll generally see that most of the years behave in this manner. But Galaxy 15 was a very interesting satellite because in 2010, it lost communications with its ground station and therefore started drifting through space because it wasn't doing its station-keeping maneuvers. And then as it moved through the GeoBelt, causing havoc, it was finally recovered at the end of 2010. And what we're looking at in the lower left-hand side there is it purposefully maneuvering back through the GeoBelt in order to get to its regular position. So we took all the data that was available to us, including the abnormal years, and we learned patterns of life using an unsupervised machine learning approach. And our results were that we were able to, in the normal years, those were the years that displayed that kind of regular intervals, we were able to accurately predict maneuvers. So what we're looking at in the lower left-hand side there is a MATLAB plot of when we predicted a maneuver to occur on day 208 of the year 2012 with a very high probability, and it did indeed happen. More interestingly, though, because this is part of a threat warning and assessment system, is when we are able to detect deviations from the expected behavior. So what we're looking at here in the lower right-hand side is that we predicted, based on the patterns of life that we had learned across the aggregated data set, that a maneuver would occur, and it did not happen. But we were able to quickly issue an alert to the space operators to say that there's a deviation from expected behaviors. And that's really the key here. The key takeaway was not that we were trying to create perfect maneuver prediction algorithms and create rock curves to get in an IEEE conference paper. What we were trying to do is we were trying to address the operational needs of the JSPOC and try to create an automatic way of cueing attention of space operators to deviations from expected behavior of satellites in the geo belt. So this is just the start of it. My goal originally was to approach the space community with the idea that we could apply methodologies and more advanced tradecraft in the GEOINT, from the GEOINT community to problems in SSA. We were able to effectively start this conversation. I had a paper out in the Space Symposium, so there seems to be a lot of interest in kind of repurposing methods developed for Land-Sea Air to the space community. This research continues through the Air Force Research Labs and Space Vehicles Directorate as we continue to try to build out this early stages of a threat warning assessment system. We do see this as the first step of a much longer effort. We see this as being operationally relevant to the needs of the JSPOC, the JICSPOC, and Air Force Space Command. We also see this technology as an enabler to future advanced analytics, such as UCT correlation, data association tasks, also dynamic tasking of limited assets and resources. If you're interested in this work, my name is Charlotte Shabarekh. I encourage you to reach out to me. There's a reference to the paper. Here's my contact information, and I will be at this conference for the duration of the event.